Good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Crisanti, and I'm with the Illinois Restaurant Association. I'd like to thank you for joining today's webinar on funding your business with Advantage Illinois. Today's webinar is being broadcast in English, Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese. To listen in other languages, please use the interpretation button in your toolbar. This webinar is being presented by the Illinois Restaurant Association in partnership with the Cook County Small Business Source. This program was established to ensure businesses emerge from COVID-19 intact and positioned for growth. The Small Business Source connects small business owners with expert guidance and support. These services include no-cost business advising, resources, and events that connect small business owners with the community of advisors. If you're interested in one-on-one business advising, you can sign up at cookcountysmallbiz.org. Also, before we begin the webinar today, I'd like everyone attending to know that the Illinois Restaurant Association remains a resource to you. We send regular email updates with what you need to know, and you can sign up for those on our website. Now, for today's webinar, you can use the Q&A button in your toolbar to post your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll save those questions and do a Q&A session at the end. At this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Thomas Huffman, Executive Vice President, Wintrust SBA Lending. Tom, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Good morning, everybody. Hope all is well. We're going to talk a little bit for the next few minutes about the Advantage Illinois program, which is, as you can see, is part of is a program managed by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So next slide, please. As you can see, this program's been around for quite a while. This was originally started as part of the Jobs Act in 2010, and this program started in 2012. Really what it does is it helps small businesses obtain, lower cost of capital, right? Lower cost of capital. That's the primary focus about this. So, in today's interest rate environment, we think this is a great tool for businesses to try to utilize. There are several banks that have signed up and are participants of this program. And we can talk a little bit more about that later about what that entails. But again, it's a great tool. So what can this program kind of do? So first off, so it can help with owner-occupied real estate, either purchase or refinance, equipment financing, leasehold improvements, and/or working capital. So for businesses, that covers a lot of the waterfront of what you might need financing for. So that's kind of number one. Really, what this is doing, why I know that sometimes financing can be hard, and sometimes you go, okay, well, my bank doesn't want to lend me money because of this reason or that reason. And so what this really does is to kind of help fill that gap. And so either if you have collateral shortfalls, it helps fill that gap. If you have down payment, okay, I don't have 25% to put down on a new property, it can maybe help fill that. Or if, we've all kind of been through a roller coaster over the last couple of years where you've had good years, bad years, good years, bad years, right? So from that standpoint, if you don't have 3 years of consistent cash flow, consistent margins, banks sometimes are reluctant to lend you money, and this program can kind of help eliminate some of that. So that's kind of critical. One of the things kind of I deal in the SBA world a lot, and this program a lot. The fees is often the first questions small businesses ask. What does it cost me? What are the fees? The state does not charge a fee for this program. The regular bank fees do apply. So if you're making a real estate loan, you still need an appraisal and title work, and those are just standard third-party costs that are part of that. But there is no fee, if you will, that gets paid to the state. So I think that's a big positive for this program compared to other kind of government programs. Next slide, please. So what are we looking for here? This is really a program for businesses and nonprofits with employees less than 500 that are in this good standing in Illinois. Really, what does that mean? That's that kind of covers a lot of businesses and nonprofits. The nonprofit is a new twist in the 23-24 edition of this program. So before it was just businesses, now it includes nonprofits. So just kind of make note of that. But what happens is the state, and how this program works is the state buys a participation in a note. And so what that means for you is that you make one loan payment. You make a loan payment to the bank. The bank then sells a part of that loan out to the state. And if whatever reason business goes bad, the bank gets paid first in any liquidation, and then the state gets paid second. And so for some of that, it's kind of I kind of view this as kind of a junior financing. So think of it as junior financing or mezz financing, if a little more sophisticated transaction. But in the bottom line is your bank gets to liquidate out all the collateral first. If there's anything left over for the state, then the state will get some of their money. But so that's where that helps, where that filling of the gap of, okay, I'm going to take a little more risk. My bank's going to take a little more risk because some of this is sold off to the state from a risk standpoint. This cannot be used for lines of credit. I'm sorry to say that. And why there's been a lot of buzz over the last 6 months on this program. And this is the sheet that I really want to talk about the most, because to me, we'll talk about, there's a standard program and a SETI program, and we'll talk about what SETI means, but you can see the power here. So the maximum participation is a lesser of 25% of a project or 50% of a note up to $2 million. The same for SETI, it's 50% of a project and 50% of a note. And what is a project financing? Well, I think so if you're going to buy $1 million building, let's say, and that's the project, and let's say you put up 15% cash, you only have 15% cash to put up, and so you can get up to 50% of that if you're a SETI, participated, so your bank would then only have to lend you $400,000 for the first mortgage, or $425,000 for the first mortgage, and the state would take a $425,000 second mortgage. Okay, well, look at the, so the maximum terms on both of them are 7 years. But here's look at the rate. So if you're a SETI, which we'll talk about, this is why a lot of people are hearing, is the rate is fixed at 2%. So you can get a 2% fixed rate on half of your project, or a half of your note. So that's, today's interest rates at 8, 9, 10%, maybe even higher. To think that you can get half of your loan paid down to 2%, that's pretty powerful. So that's kind of this is why this is a big deal. This is why everyone wants to talk about it, because this is kind of really important. So what this is really about a job creation and job retention piece. So this, if you will, one full-time job should be created to retain, create or retain for $50,000 of state funding. And the same thing applies for SETI. So from that standpoint, we're in really good, so if you're a restaurant and you have 20 employees, you could, in theory, get up to $1 million. So that's it's a decent amount of leverage. It's if you're a small shop and you have 4 or 5 employees, that's going to be harder to kind of leverage this program. But for the most part, we kind of think restaurants are a really good tool here because they're looking at, not FTEs, they're looking at employees. So if you have 20, 15 part-time employees, that's 15 people. That's not, how many is that full-time equivalent? So anyway, go to the next slide, please, and we can talk about what SETI is. Okay, this is the SETI component of this program. The program is new end of last year. So this is why, and this is where, and the interest rate of 2% is new from compared to the prior years. So here's what it lays out. You're, member group of there's some cultural bias, if you're a minority, if you're a woman, a veteran, English limited proficiency, English limited proficiency. So if you're, an immigrant of any kind, I guess, if you're from, whether it's from Mexico, China, or from Eastern Europe, that all would potentially apply. So I think that's a huge win there. If your business is located in a rural community, they don't really define where rural is. So I would guess there's parts of the parts not too far from Chicago area that is considered rural. So or is your community undergoing economic transition? And or the next thing we talk about is a CDI investment area, and I have a link here, so you can click on that link, and once you click on that link, it'll take you to the Department of Treasury's webpage for CDFIs. You click on the state of Illinois, and you type in your address, and it will show you whether you're in the green area zone or not. And for example, there's a bunch of spots in, the south side of Chicago is included in this. Aurora, we have a bank in Rockford that has a lot in that zone. So I think you'd be surprised how many businesses might fit into this bucket. So if you figure how many are women owned, how many are minority owned, how many are English, in Chicago, how many are, English as a second language, so, and or CFI, so you throw that in. We kind of think this opportunity bucket's pretty massive. And so this is, again, why is this important? So if you go to the previous slide, go back to the previous slide, if you don't mind, this is where your 2% interest rate. So if the bank would charge you normally 8%, and you get half your loan at 2%, you would then get a blended rate of 5%. So 5% in today's business environment is much better, much more palatable, and something that we think it's worth talking about, and that's why we're here today. To me, this can lower your cost of capital, up to three percentage points. And and again, we think it covers a lot of businesses, small and big, throughout the state. And again, so if you have employees up to a company up with companies up to 750 employees, this covers you there. So, anyway, so let's go back to the previous slide. So again, if you have any questions and there's no, what this does is you just have to self-certify that you're in one of these groups. They're not going to go and do a background check on you and say, okay, well, is your English, proficient or not? And they're not going to give you a test to make sure that, so just kind of understand that. Next slide, if you don't mind. So anyway, so some of the things that you can and can't do with this program, and again, as we mentioned earlier, you could do equipment, real estate, leasehold improvements, but some things you cannot do with this program is, finance or refinance goodwill. So you can't buy out a partner with this transaction. You can't buy another business. You cannot be a cannabis company. You can finance owner-occupied real estate, as we mentioned earlier, but you can't do investment property. So what that means is that, if you have a 3-flat with your business on the first floor, then it doesn't qualify as owner occupied because it's not 51%. The number to be owner occupied is 51%. So you can finance an apartment building with this. Adult entertainment, gambling, or tobacco enterprises cannot participate in this program. So that's a few things that don't fit here, but the list is not. But there's still, I think, a much broader list that fit into this program. What you can do is you can have an existing loan with Bank A and go to Bank B and get that debt refinanced. So if you nothing else, if you have a floating rate transaction that has gone up, several points in the last couple of years, this might be a great tool to use to lower your cost of capital from where it is today. Clearly, it's always better when you're trying to get both the state and the new bank involved, is if you have a new project. Hey, I want to do this, and I want to use the Illinois Advantage Illinois program to basically lower my cost of capital. But so that's one of the things you can do. And then the other thing is, government programs are great, but they generally don't mix well in the sandbox together. So they're great if you have a 7A or a 504 loan that you're doing with a bank. You can't use this loan. They can't sell half this loan to you and lower that interest rate. So if you're doing a 7A, you have to kind of go down that path and have to continue down that path. But if you have a 7A on your books today, currently with Bank A, you could go to Bank B and ask them to refinance that 7A and again, lower your cost of capital. So that is something, I would consider. I think we've done that on probably a dozen occasions over the last decade. It's a great great tool to use for especially a business that's probably 2 or 3 years old that now has established cash flow that didn't have it before. And just kind of a way to kind of lower the cost of capital. That's really what we're talking about. So the other thing is, as we talk about, is this SETI businesses. I hope everyone understands that's the driver. You can, if your business is not a SETI business, you can still get a lower cost of capital. It's 2% below the note rate. And so it would save you about a half a point on potentially on a transaction. You know, but it's best utilized for SETI businesses, refinancing owner occupied real estate, and any other kind of floating rate debt. We just happen to know that a lot of SBA 7A loans are done in the restaurant space. We happen to know that they're often floating rates. And so these are all things that we kind of think that this is really a good tool for. Next slide, please. So what's the process? We'll talk a little bit about the process, you know, kind of thing. So once you find a lender, and again, if you go on the if you just type in Advantage Illinois into your web search, you can click on there, and from there you can find a list of banks. If your bank is not on that list, that's okay. You can still ask them, go to your bank and ask them if they would participate in this program. You will not be the first customer to ask them, nor will you be the last. We get this question all the time. And some people, you know, oh, I didn't know you're already on the list. But to sign up, they have to sign an agreement that maybe is like 15, 20 pages. I don't remember how long it is. You know, you can have their attorney review it in a day, and you can get signed up, you know, in 2 or 3 days. We had I was telling someone earlier, we had one of our charter banks, Wheaton Bank and Trust, who needed to get signed up between Christmas and New Year's because they had a transaction they were working on, and we got it done in 2 days, got them signed up. So you can get this done fairly quickly. Your bank can get it done fairly quickly. It does not take an act of Congress, if you will, to get signed up. So I think just want to make sure you understand that. If your bank's not participating in this program, I would try to strongly encourage them to sign up. So again, once you find a lender, you need to complete your Illinois tax clearance form by both the borrower and any principal shareholder. Okay. That just, the one thing is they will not move the transaction forward until you have that. This form cannot be DocuSign. It has to be what they call wet signature. So you need to actually sign the form, and then you should submit that to the bank. The bank, once they have a draft of their loan approval, they then can send that draft of that loan approval along with your tax clearance form to this email address. Okay, then those people, that's kind of a group email. They then parcel it out to an individual who will review it and work with your bank on this and you on this. And over a period of 3 or 4 weeks, you'll eventually come at the end with an approval. If there's any problems with this transaction, they'd be happy to kind of step in and get some issues resolved. But I think your biggest piece in this is to talk to your bank and see if they're on the list, and if they're not, get them signed up, and then get that tax clearance form. And I think that tax clearance form is like 2 pages. I just want to make sure that you're up to date on any of your sales tax or income tax or payroll taxes. They just want to make sure that you're up to date on all those taxes. And that's what this tax clearance form does. And so again, talk to your bank about this, fill out the tax form, and get that form to your bank. And once the loan is approved, the state will issue an approval letter, and then the bank can then complete their normal closing process. After loan is closed, they then will, then the state will fund the loan after loan has been closed. You know, it again, other than as we say here, it's about 4 to 6 weeks for approval. That's a little bit longer than we would like it to be. I know from our standpoint, we would like it to be 2 or 3 weeks, but you know, this is a government program, so it can be sometimes delayed a little bit. That's the only downside. But again, as I said, I think, you know, we use this tool both for refinancing new customers to the bank, and we also use it on new projects. But the refinancing projects are probably a little bit easier to get done from a standpoint if you have existing cash flow, and it just helps, again, helps lower your cost of capital. And that's really what this program is about, is to help lower your cost of capital.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, maybe clarify for some folks on the phone, based on the purpose or the use of the loan, how long the amortization can be on real estate, equipment, leasehold. So I
Sure.
think we use the word term, and that's really just the maturity of the loan versus the payback
The
period.
amortization. Okay, sure. Yeah, John, thank you. So for on real estate we'll start with real estate transactions. We might do a 5 or 7 year term on that, but it's a 25-year amortization. So that loan, so if you have an owner occupied real estate, we might refinance it, and your payments would be based on a 25-year payback, but the loan will mature in 5 or 7 years. Equipment and leasehold improvements, we would go, the loan term and the amortization would probably match at 7 years, because this program can go up to 7 years. And so I think that's an advantage over maybe a traditional bank would require 5 years. So I think that's another advantage that we didn't talk too much about. Those are two of the, you know, the same thing with working capital. So if you have some working capital, you know, you can go up to 7 years and get that 2% rate. So that's kind of, you know, again, it kind of blends the government, you know, backing, allows for longer amortization, and provides the low cost of capital. So I think it often does, it's a double-edged sword. But you know, it's a pretty strong product as far as I'm concerned. Teresa, it looks like there's a few questions in the chat. We want to.
Yeah, definitely. We can move on to Q&A.
Okay.
So one question, I heard that this program can help fund concession opportunities at the airport. Is that true? If so, how would that work?
So it's been a while since we did we have a couple concession, we have 3 or 4 concession ear customers, and we have used this program for that. So and I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it's been a while. So a lot of times these companies are buying into, are building out a store, and it's all leasehold improvements, right? There's not a lot of collateral. And with that, we lend, you know, so let's just say there's a $500,000 project, you'd lend, 90% of that or 80% of that, somewhere between there, depends on how much experience that business owner has. And then we would then use the state to come in and help us. What that would do on that transaction would lower our risk in case something doesn't go well, and lower your cost of capital. So it actually then helps us with the potential repayment ability for that enterprise. So, we make the loan to fund the leasehold improvements. Once the loan is fully funded, we then would get the state to come in and then would amortize the loan over that, 5 or 7 year period, as we mentioned. Does that
Great.
answer your question? Whomever asked that question?
I think you hit it on the head. Yeah.
Okay,
We'll see in the chat if they have a follow-up question.
okay, sure.
Does my business have to be located in an economic opportunity zone to qualify?
No, they don't. You can qualify if you go back to earlier slide. Keep going. Can you go back any further? There you go. The standard here is people that are not in the economic zone. But if then go advance it to the next page. So to get to 2%, you need to be in the zone, or a woman, or a minority, or a veteran, or English limited proficiency. It's not an and, it's an or.
So at least one of these to qualify.
You just have to check one box.
Got it.
One box.
Okay. Next question. Does this program assist with startups?
It can, and it has occasionally. It can, yes. It depends on your lender, whether they will do it that, will do startups, and or will they do we don't Wintrust does not do a lot of startups in this program, but it can be done, and we've done a few, but we've got other products that give us more support, and therefore we don't do it very often. But that's just kind of that's Wintrust. It's not this program allows for it, and
So, so it's possible.
It's possible. The program allows for it. That they would encourage it. Talk to your bank.
Okay, great. Where can I find a lender? I know you covered that. You can go to the DCO website, Advantage Illinois, and search for a lender, or you said, Tom, ask your bank if they participate.
Yeah, everybody just they start with asking their bank, or you can go, go to Advantage Illinois, and it's right there.
And yeah, it's very easy to find a lender.
It's right on the left. You go to that page, you type in Advantage Illinois, you go to the page, and participating institutions is on the left page. It's right there. You can't miss it. If an old guy like me can find it, someone younger can as well.
And what is the likelihood of an application being approved?
A lot depends on, at the end of the day, the loan still needs to cash flow regardless of the collateral. This helps with the collateral shortfall gaps, or happens with your performance being up and down. But at the end of the day, your most recent history, your last 6 months or so, or last 12 months, you need to make enough and generated enough cash flow, are projected to have enough cash flow to pay back the loan. So the more, now, if you have an interest rate 11% today, and you're barely being able to make the payments because rates are 11%, if you refinance it and you get a 5% interest rate, you might have a lot better chance of, making it. But if you have a negative cash flow, and you had negative cash flow the last 2 years, it's going to be hard for a bank to finance this. That's just kind of my take. I can tell you that a lot of people are using it to help lower their cost of capital, and or fund growth, right? So a lot depends on what are your plans Are you just refinancing your existing debt? What's going on with your sales? What's going on with your operation? So that's hard to really kind of say. John, do you have anything you want to add to those comments?
No, bankers, usually start off being pretty formulaic, so they're gonna want to look at numbers and
Yeah.
show that there's enough income in the business to cover whatever the proposed debt service will be, which will be your principal payments and interest payments. But like, as Tom said, if you're lowering your interest rate substantially, what didn't work might work. And so you really have to start by, crunching the numbers a little bit and then posing that to your bank in a very easy to understand, fashion. So.
Well, I think that's all for the questions. So we're going to wrap up here. Thank you so much, Tom and John, for today, for your time today. I'd like to thank the Cook County Small Business Source and the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity for their continued partnership. Following the conclusion of this webinar, everyone will receive email with links to the webinar recording and the presentation. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you all for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take
Take care.
care. Bye now.